Do they know about your insane Southwest magazine profile? They were, the Olio guys and me also were profiled in Southwest Airlines magazine. There's like a picture of me and the two of them, like fancy, like there's like a whole spread, it's like a photo shoot and everything. But just like, I discovered something, which is that a surprisingly large number of people read those little magazines in the back of in the airport seat in front of them. I don't know if that's because of terrorism, they're scared or something, but like, you don't bring a book to the airport? That's like the most important place to have a book. And then also the iPhone, iPads, why are you even reaching? But people read this. I've gotten people who are like, Geoff, I saw you in Southwest Airlines magazine. All right, I'm gonna start by talking about that performance that we just saw, actually, because that's a perfectly good place. Yeah, that's better, okay. Because I'm short, so it doesn't really, I have to use the microphone, right? All right, fine. It makes me talk quieter. It does that. That's how you get that like NPR voice, you know? The like, that's what I did with NPR tonight. I'm like loud. The thing I want to point out about that performance is if you know Macbeth, I'm sure you recognize the speech from The Witches, the double toil and trouble, which has become so famous in sort of pop culture portrayals of witches. And then if you know Macbeth well enough, you also probably recognize that the come you mortals, the unsex me here speech from Lady Macbeth that she does. You spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. That they transitioned directly from the witches into the Lady Macbeth speech. And also that the first person to say Lady Macbeth's lines, I'm sorry I don't know the name of all of our actors this evening, had a beard. So I'm sure your first response was like, is that Lady Macbeth? That dude has a beard. But that's actually, I think, really interesting and kind of exactly what I want to talk about. There's a couple of things to notice about that, is that for starters, let's start with the witches. The witches, Shakespeare doesn't have descriptions of characters. There's some stage directions in there, and we're really unclear how many of those Shakespeare himself put into the book. So when you're figuring out what people are doing, you're often going by what people say. Because there's dialogue, right? The scripts are dialogue that actors deliver, which is nice because it gives you a lot of room to kind of manipulate the text and sort of decide what they're discussing about, because it's often not clarified in the text itself. For example, there's a very famous line in Hamlet where Polonius says, he says, oh, I think the reason that Hamlet is crazy is because he's in love with my daughter, he says to Claudius. And then he says this, if this be otherwise, take this from this. Which nobody really knows what that means. We're pretty sure it means something like, if this be otherwise, take this from this. Meaning I'm so sure about this, you can chop my head off my body if I'm wrong, right? If this be otherwise, take this from this. That's usually what I guess that's right, but we don't really know. But what we do know from the speeches in Lady Macbeth is that Banquo at one point, when he sees the witches, says, you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. And it's something when you see stage productions and film productions of Macbeth, they often cut out the fact that the witches are supposed to have beards. In pop culture representations, you often get that one hairy mole, when you like the classic witch with the hat and the broomstick and the whole thing. But you often get that one hairy mole as a kind of symbol of that. But like a lot of the Macbeth versions don't have bearded witches is a very odd sight. The Verdi opera, I saw a version of it that where they have, instead of 3 witches, Verdi was like 100 witches would be better, right? It was like the Michael Bay of doing Shakespeare. But the women have these huge beards, and it's very ridiculous and dramatic. But the witches are supposed to have beards, and sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there. I'm going to come back to it. The interesting thing to note about the modern day equivalent of this is often one of the witches will be played by a man. In Orson Welles' Macbeth, for instance, he casts a guy with the women who are playing the witches. In the fast food version of Macbeth, the movie Scotland, Pennsylvania with Maura Tierney, the 2 of the witches are played by men. One of the witches is played by Andy Dick. So It's like it's a fast food restaurant where they kill their boss and it becomes Macbeth's, but it's obviously McDonald's. It's funny. It's not. It's okay. It's fine. They don't. It's not Shakespeare's language, so it's not really Shakespeare, but it's funny. But both Orson Welles' Macbeth and the Scotland Pennsylvania movie put men in the women's roles. There's an Australian version where the women are like sexy schoolgirls and Macbeth has sex with all of them in an orgy. It's not my very favorite version of Macbeth, but it's got a very young Sam Worthington in it. If you're like, because there was a split second when he was going to be a movie star, and this would have been his juvenilia had he gone on to do more exciting things than he ended up doing. But Avatar was, he was good. They were going to make him a movie star for like 20 seconds. He was going to, I don't know what happened there. He didn't get into Marvel. The thing about the witches having beards that's interesting, though, is, of course, most people know, and it's from things like, say, Shakespeare in Love, that in Shakespeare's day, women weren't allowed to play on the stage at all because, as today, acting was considered to be, a very... you can't put women in that situation. That's going to be very dangerous for them. Actors are, druggy, lunatic, corrupters of the youth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so the parts were all played by boys, the females. So the witches would have all been played by men. And then you had this interesting moment where Banquo says, he looks at the witches and says, "You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so." And he's talking to a man, a boy, a young man, an old man. But it's an interesting moment where it kind of breaks that fourth wall. Because you realize he's saying you should be a woman and you're actually a man. That goes for all the women in Shakespeare at the time. And he's drawing attention to something that the audience is aware of, right? I mean, the audience at the time, they know there are no women up there. And to point that out, the fancy TV term would be to lampshade it, if you want. That's like the jargon, I guess, in the industry. It's when you draw attention to an error rather than, you're not gonna try to hide it. You're gonna kind of draw attention to it, make a little joke out of it, move on. So at that moment, Banquo was drawing attention to the fact that the actor in front of him is a young man or an old man, and you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. And it's a dangerous move because for a split second. Right, the idea of theater is you're supposed to get sucked into the illusion of the thing, right? When you go see like a really good movie with, IMAX surround sound, 3D glasses. I saw Gravity on Super Bowl Sunday. Go to the movies on Super Bowl Sunday. No one is there. It's amazing. I felt like a king. It was great. But you get immersed. You're in that world, right? I was in that world with the perfect surround sound. Then it was over. I was like, oh right, that's a movie, and I am not Sandra Bullock anymore. But in the play, right? So you're supposed to get sucked into the illusion, and when you do something like look at a character that you expect that is the audience knows a man is playing that role, and yet they're portraying a female, and then you say you should be men, and yet you should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. It has the effect of breaking. You're thrown out of it for a second. You're like, oh right, I guess that is a young man up there on stage, right? It pulls you out of it, and it theoretically that should damage the experience, right? That should be bad. Right, your whole point of theater is to get into the illusion of it. Shakespeare's providing illusions, and you are pretending. The actors are up there pretending, right? They're pretending. My favorite line about acting comes from a Borges, the short story writer. He has a really, really crucial line about acting where he says, "An actor is a person who stands on a stage and pretends to be another person, obviously, in front of an audience of people who pretend to take him for that person." That's interesting, right? Because Christian Bale goes, "I'm Batman," right? And then but he's not Batman, right? He's Christian Bale, right? He was in fucking Newsies, right? I mean, I know that's not Batman. Did you forget that he was in Newsies? Because he was in Newsies. He was also, by the way, in Midsummer Night's Dream in 1999, opposite Michelle Pfeiffer and Stanley Tucci, and it's a ridiculous movie. But he says, "I'm Batman," right? And he's pretending to be someone he's not. That's not really Batman. But the thing is audiences there's an assumption that the actors up on stage, they're pretending, right? But you know better. But actually, you're pretending too, right? If you lean over to the guy next to you in the seat and go, "Why did he say that? He's not Batman. That's Christian Bale. I don't understand what is happening right now," right? But but it makes a really important point, which is that you're pretending as much as the actors are. Right, that whatever it's not those people on stage that are pretending. You are equally pretending, and you are broken out of that pretending when Shakespeare does something like, "You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so." Well, the other thing I liked about the performance that we just saw is, of course, it transitioned directly from the witches into Lady Macbeth. And it's one of those moves that suggests that there's a linking between those characters, right? And when an actor transitions immediately from one character to another character, it forces you, the audience, to go, well, wait a minute, how similar are these characters, right? Oh, I forgot to do something before this lecture. Holly, how do you say, is it Hippolyta? I don't remember how to say your name. I read it a bunch and I didn't hear it out loud enough and I forgot before I got here. Good, all right, fine. So, like, for example, in Midsummer Night's Dream, Oberon and Titania are the king and queen of the fairies, and Theseus and... Holly, did you get it yet? But Theseus and Hippolyta, somebody in here must know? Did I get it right? Oh, good for me. So I mean, I said Zizek for years, and it's not Zizek, it's Zizek. I said Paglia, and it's Paglia. I said Bartholomew, and it turns out it's Bartolome. I wasn't even really close. But in Midsummer Night's Dream, it's very, very common because Oberon and Titania, king and queen of the fairies, are never on stage when Hippolyta and Theseus are on stage. You have the same actors play both roles. Because you don't, right? I mean, let's pay two less people, right? Yeah, I got it. Holly says I got it right. Thanks, Holly. But so often those roles are played by the same actors. But that creates interesting connections between the levels, right? Where you start going, well, wait a minute, am I supposed to see, is this some kind of reflection of the world? When you see the same actors show up in different roles, that makes you start sort of connecting things together. And they did something similar by having the witches in Lady Macbeth. And the speech that they chose from Lady Macbeth, of course, is Lady Macbeth saying, come you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. The moment where Lady Macbeth is saying, we're gonna kill King Duncan, and she's praying to evil, murderous night spirits for strength. And she says, unsex me here, make me like a man. So it's interesting that the witches, played by men, they should be women, and yet their beards forbid me to interpret that they are so. And then we slide immediately into Lady Macbeth, saying, with a beard, saying, come you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, make me like a man. Because she wants male, masculine power. But it's interesting also that, again, the actor asking to be made like a man probably had a penis. So it creates, again, that short circuit. And this is one of those moments, maybe you don't want a short circuit at that moment. This is one of Lady Macbeth's bigger moments, right? This is one of her this is the introduction of her character, being a huge badass and playing for strength from murdering ministers or whatever kind of freaky night creature she's talking to in the Black Lodge. And she says, and she wants to be transformed into a man, and the audience member might go, well, she actually kind of is a man. So it pulls you out of the illusion. And what I'm interested in looking at tonight is these moments when Shakespeare sort of pulls us out of the illusion. Yeah, all right, cool. By the way, it's also worth noting that of course, the reason the witches have beards, similar to, and to think about Lady Macbeth wanting to be like a man, and I like that our Lady Macbeth had a beard tonight, is that, of course, beards are the symbol of power, right? Famous people that have beards, right? Santa Claus. Who else? Gandalf and Dumbledore, obviously. The guy from the Bible, God. God has a beard, right? He usually has a big, giant flowing. It's a symbol of, like, power, right? And what Lady Macbeth is asking for, and what the witches have, is that kind of masculine male power, right? And so they're praying to be transformed in that way into having beards. And of course, also, the person that played Lady Macbeth would have been a young man. So he would not have a beard yet, right? But once he gets a beard, he can start playing the male roles. So I think some of the younger men were eager. Shakespeare has lines where he mentions the young men being eager to have the beard so they can play the male roles and they can stop playing the female roles. So it's a symbol of male power, but it's interesting that it short circuits with the actor in odd ways. I got onto this topic because I've been rewatching every David Lynch movie, starting and all the TV shows and everything, because I rewatched all the old Twin Peaks in the lead up to watching the new Twin Peaks, and then loved it so much I was like, I need to rewatch every single thing this guy's ever done. And I watched them. Also, it was the 20th anniversary of Lost Highway, which made me feel really old because I saw that in theaters opening weekend. But I wanted to rewatch all of this David Lynch material, and I'm not going to go on a whole David Lynch thing tonight because I'm not going to lose. I'm going to lose like almost all of y'all. All of y'all, yeah. But David Lynch, in David Lynch, there's a moment where in the new series, David Lynch comes in and he says, "I had my Monica Bellucci dream again." And Monica Bellucci is an actress I know her from Dracula, but I was at the right age to appreciate her charms in the 1992 Dracula movie when that movie came out. But Monica Bellucci is an actress. She also played, I think, Jesus' mom in the Mel Gibson Jesus thing. So I didn't Hacksaw Ridge was actually pretty good. Okay, it was kind of surprisingly. I thought we were done with Mel Gibson, and it's kind of I didn't want to like it as much as I liked it. So he said, David Lynch says, I had the Monica Bellucci dream again, and it cuts to a black and white shot, and you get to see the dream that he had, and the dream involves him seeing Monica Bellucci. And she says to him, we live inside a dream. We live inside of a dream, but who is the dreamer? And that's pretty much the essence of it, and you're out. And so I started thinking about that in connection to some of these. And what's interesting about it is he has Monica Bellucci playing herself. So it's, again, one of these sort of short-circuity moments where you're not noticing. The idea is that if you're going to do the illusion of acting, the actor should disappear, and you should just see the character, right? Like Gary Oldman in the Winston Churchill movie or whatever, right? The actress who or like Tom Hardy, who kind of vanishes into whatever role he's doing. He looks different in every, or Daniel Day-Lewis also. Like, you can't even believe that's the same guy. He vanishes into these roles. But what David Lynch is doing is by saying, oh, that's Monica Bellucci, and then it's actually the actress Monica Bellucci that you know from other movies. It starts to kind of break it's interesting that he has an actress playing herself delivering this line in Twin Peaks. And so I was starting to think about that in connection with some of these moments in Shakespeare where we have that kind of short circuit. So I got a handout for you guys, and I thought I would look at some of the moments in here that do that. I'm going to be zipping around this Hamlet. I'm not going to talk about everything on this. Did I say Hamlet? I'm going to be zipping around this handout. I was looking at the word Hamlet when I said it. Shut up. So I'm going to be zipping around a little bit, but one of the most famous ones is from Midsummer Night's Dream, where all of the mechanicals, the regular folks, are going to put on a play for the upcoming wedding of Theseus and Hippolyta. Right? Did I do that again? Change it? No, I did that same, right? Okay, good. So they're doing the wedding, and Bottom says, "Are we all met?" They're rehearsing their play. Are we all met? Pat, and here's a marvelous, convenient place for our rehearsal. This green plot shall be our stage. This hawthorn brake, our tiring house, and we will do it in action as we will do it before the Duke. Peter Quince, what sayest thou, Bully Bottom? There are things in this comedy of Pyramus and Thisbe which will never please. First, Pyramus must draw a sword and kill himself, which the ladies cannot abide. How answer you that? Why, Larkin, parlous fear. I believe we must leave the killing out when all is done. Not a whit. I have a device to make all well. Write me a prologue, and let the prologue seem to say we will do no harm with our swords, and that Pyramus is not killed indeed, and for the more better assurance, tell them that I, Pyramus, am not Pyramus, but Bottom the Weaver. This will put them out of fear. Right, literally, he says, right, and I love the line where he says, this green plot shall be our stage. Dude, that green plot is I'm watching you on stage right now, and the green plot that you're pointing to that you're going to pretend is the stage that I am currently watching. And it's funny because they both kind of over and underestimate the audience in funny ways, right? Because on the one hand, they're concerned that they need to kind of the illusion. It's moonlight during the scene, so they're like, okay, who's going to play the moon? Like, I don't think you need anybody to play the moon, right? The audience will go along with you. It's fine. But they're like, no, we got to have somebody play the moon. And they have a dude with a lantern who's going to be the moon because you idiot audience members won't be able to figure it out if they don't do it all for you, right? On the other hand, they're concerned that you're going to do so much work that you won't understand that what you're watching is actually theater, right? That they need to have a disclaimer in front of the play saying, by the way, no one was killed in this action, right? That even though you saw me, Pyramus and Thisbe, by the way, it's Romeo and Juliet. It's the same kind of thing. So and he calls it a comedy, but because he mistakes things. But the point is that he underestimates the audience. Oh, we better have some dude play the moon with a lantern. But he also overestimates the audience because when they see an actor who's a lion, they're going to get freaked out and think it's an actual lion and run away, is what he says later on in the piece. And again, he's concerned that when they die on stage, the audience will get confused and think that they died for real. But it's interesting for the Shakespeare's having this conversation about the nature of theater and while you're watching it, and it creates a complete and radical short circuit. right? That they say the stage, and they're actually on a stage, but for them, it's supposed to be just a green plot of land. And of course, when they point over here to the Hawthorne break, that'll be the tiring house. That probably was where, you know, costume changes or whatever. In fact, yeah. Anyway, it happens in the play. So it's a short circuit moment. Now, some of these. In Midsummer Night's Dream, it feels more like some of our modern comedies. And by the way, the whole thing in the woods with the four young people who, I love you, no, I hate you, no, I love you, no, and they switch back and forth. It's Friends in little. Everybody sleeps with everybody. At some point, everyone's in love with everyone else. At some point, everyone has slept with everyone else. They work out all the permutations, just like any long-running sitcom would eventually go through the thing. Although, if you really want the origin of the sitcom Much Ado About Nothing is Seinfeld. You could draw a straight line from Much Ado About Nothing to The Importance of Being Earnest to Seinfeld. There. Where Seinfeld literally goes, it's a show about nothing. By the way, same kind of thing in Seinfeld, too, right? Where they're like, oh, we're going to do a television show about our lives. And you're watching, it's just like in Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a play that has a play in it. Seinfeld is a show that has a show in it. And they specifically say, what's the show about? Well, it's about nothing. Well, go read Much Ado About Nothing, and then do The Importance of Being Earnest, where characters just sit around and talk nonsense, and it's hilarious. And nobody learns any lessons, and it's just, you're just watching people just eat and be mean to each other. My favorite line in Importance of Being Earnest is when she says, well, I think we should call a spade a spade. And the other girl says, I think you and I travel, I don't even know what a spade is. I think you and I travel in very different social circles. It's just delightfully bitchy. Yeah, I'm not doing that. So I have all these little, there's all these, in my head, there's all these little paths we could go down, but I'm picking the best ones. So in a comedy, it makes a certain amount of sense, right? Comedies often have these kind of fourth wall breaking, the silly stuff, right, where they do the kind of waka, 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 look at the audience. I mean, Deadpool is built off of that entire concept, right, is that Deadpool is going to look directly at the audience, and he's going to say these kind of meta-theatrical things, right? There's a moment when Deadpool's anyway, you know what Deadpool is, right? So Deadpool is assassin Marvel property. So at one point, for example, Colossus from the X-Men grabs him, and they're like, we'll take you to Professor Xavier. And Deadpool says, is it Patrick Stewart or James McAvoy? Which timeline are we in? Like, and they don't respond to that, right? But he's talking about the actors who play the roles in the different X-Men movies where we've had two different actors play that role. So there's all these kind of like meta jokes, and we expect that. It's funny. It's a little like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You're the audience. You're in on the joke. You get it. But what's interesting about Shakespeare is that he also does those moments at serious times, when you normally would not want to break the illusion. I mean, to break the illusion in a comedy doesn't matter, because as long as the audience is laughing, you have a successful show. It's fine. It's fine, right? You can do the jokes, the meta jokes, and whatever, and it works. But you generally think, surely you don't want to pull the audience, because you don't pull the audience out of the illusion for the serious stuff, right? For Hamlet and for Macbeth. But Shakespeare does, and I've already pointed out the moments in Macbeth where he pulls the audience out of that. And in fact, if you want to go farther into Macbeth, Shakespeare's one of the singular, most amazing speeches in all of human literature or whatever, is tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, I'm going to fuck it up now. I got in my own head, and I thought I was going to fuck it up. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. Like, really? Really, is that the moment? The biggest, like, most famous, his wife is dead? And this is his reaction to it, his whole universe. There's a debate, by the way, about people think that shows that he's not really into his wife that much, but I feel like he definitely is. His whole universe has disintegrated into little pieces. Harold Bloom has a good quip about this. He says that in all of Shakespeare, the Macbeths are the only happily married couple. He's kind of right. I know people don't like Harold Bloom, but I like him. But that's a really good point. They are Shakespeare's only happily married couple. It's amazing. Because they're partners. He calls her my dearest partner in greatness. And she dies, his whole universe disintegrates. And this is a huge moment for him. And not only is it a huge moment for him, the character, but it's a huge moment about just the cosmos, right? It's this massive, if this was a film, you back the whole camera up into the galaxy and realize we're all just fucking dust. I went to Hawaii, and I went stargazing, and I'm not like a nature guy. I really like the Jim Gaffigan joke where he says, my friends invited me to go camping, and so I made a list of things I'm going to need. Number one, new friends. But I'm not like an outdoorsy guy, but I went to Hawaii, and the thing about Hawaii is that it's in the middle of fucking nowhere because it's all water, and there's an observatory there, so even the cities have to use this special kind of like low light LED so it doesn't fuck up the telescopes or whatever. And I went stargazing, and like, holy shit, like stars out there don't look anything like the stars here. And I was like, we killed the sky. It looked like this until like 1900, and then we just broke the literal sky. But it's like a big cosmic, big Macbeth moment about the entire nature of the universe, right? And at that moment, Shakespeare chooses to draw attention to the fact that what you are watching is not a man whose wife has just died and who fate has conspired to destroy, and also his own insanity has just killed him. But it's at that moment that Shakespeare's like it's a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. He draws attention to the actual stage machinery. And it's not the only serious tragedy where he does that. And then he says that life is a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury and signifying nothing. Right? That life is a play, and then he complains about the story that the play is about, that it's a tale told by an idiot. He does the same thing in Hamlet. One of the weirdest moments in Hamlet. And it's one of those kind of blink and you'll miss it. It goes by in just a split second, and it doesn't read as well to modern audiences. But when the ghost shows up to tell Hamlet, hey, your uncle murdered me, right? The serpent which stole I'm gonna fuck it up now. So thy father's life now wears the crown or whatever. But the king says, your uncle, my brother, murdered me, and you got to get revenge. And Hamlet, he has an interesting reaction to this. And then the ghost gives him a whole big speech and tells him all this shit. And then the ghost says at the end of the speech, remember me. Right, which is, of course, and it's a famous line, actually. Like the Lion King does it when Simba, you've forgotten me, and James Earl Jones is in the clouds or whatever. Also, there's a weird version of it in Spider-Man 3. I don't know if you guys, it's probably too late to talk about Spider-Man 3, but if you've seen Spider-Man 3, the James Franco character gets smashed on the head, and he loses his memory, and then he goes over to the mirror when he begins to remember, and Willem Dafoe, who played his dad in the first movie and wasn't in the third movie at all, or the second one, but his dad shows up. Spider-Man killed Will. His dad got killed trying to fight Spider-Man, but in his mind, it's Spider-Man's fault. And his dad shows up, and by the way, James Franco's wearing all black, like the traditional Hamlet garb. And his Willem Dafoe shows up and goes, "You remember me?" And I laughed so hard in the movie, and I got shushed by a bunch of like 14-year-olds. But it was like, that's a ridiculous. You're really doing a Hamlet reference in the middle of this ridiculous movie with the Sandman and Venom and fucking Topher Grace. But all right, that's what you want to do. Go for it, Sam. Sam Raimi, you're cool. That was a fucked up movie, but you made Darkman, so we're gonna let it go. But Hamlet, when Hamlet is told to remember me, it's a weird moment, right? Because it's an intense moment, right? He's just seen the ghost of his father who has instructed him to kill his uncle. And Hamlet's like, I am definitely gonna remember this. Like, I should think fucking so. Like, you're already in trouble with that play, that his ghost dad feels the need to remind him, like, don't forget what I said. How would any normal human being forget what you fucking said? But Hamlet, he knows his kid. He knows Hamlet is indeed gonna forget and get very fucking distracted, much like myself up here talking about Spider-Man 3. And he's gonna get seriously distracted and lose track of the entire revenge scheme for like 4 hours. And by the way, one of the things he's gonna do with his spare time in Hamlet when he's supposed to be killing King Claudius but doesn't do it, he's gonna make a play. And that just like in Midsummer Night's Dream, there is a play inside of the play, and he's going to have a lot of comments about actors and the nature of acting and the nature of theater, and like it's the same move where Shakespeare again draws attention to the artificiality of the world that you're watching in a play that's supposed to be a very serious work of literature. It's choosing to pull you out of it. But Hamlet's line that I really love is when the ghost says, "Remember me," Hamlet says, I'm sorry, I'm on page 3. I forgot to tell you guys to look at the handout. It's on the, I'm just jumping around. But when the ghost says, "Remember me," Hamlet says, "I, thou poor ghost, while memory holds a seat in this distracted globe, remember thee." Now, obviously, what Hamlet means is, the globe he's talking about is his skull. And as long as memory has a seat in his head, as long as he is alive, in his brain is in his skull, he will always remember the ghost's words. But of course, the theater that Shakespeare did the play is called The Globe. That was the name of Shakespeare's theater. And who is he? He's probably delivering this speech to the audience. And he's saying to them, I, a poor ghost, as long as memory holds a seat in this distracted globe. Really? Like, that is going to pull you immediately out of the story, because you're like, can he see me? No, he's looking at me now. It's creeping me out. And so it's he breaks that fourth wall of that, and it's a serious moment and it's a little throwaway moment, but they're peppered all in Hamlet's stuff are these kind of meta-theatrical moments. And I tell my students this, that we're like Deadpool. Every once in a while, it feels like Hamlet knows that he's in a play. Oh, right. So then he talks to the players. I don't think I'm doing a whole thing about the players, right? Oh, well, all right. When the players come, Hamlet, he gets very excited about the players when the theater guys come. And he says, oh, this is exciting. And he says, oh, can you do this speech? And he starts to do the speech. And oh, my God, he's got the entire speech memorized. He knows so much about the details of being an actor and the life of an actor. He really talks like a professional actor to actors, right? It's like everything he's doing is like inside baseball, right? He knows all the stuff they're talking about. He knows all the technical terms. He knows the world of actors. This is a prince. He's probably supposed to be studying something else. He's shown absolutely zero aptitude for murder. And he gets really into the theater. But the speech that he remembers, oh, I remember this speech. Well, the speech is about a nephew who's supposed to kill his uncle. Like, come on! And the sword sticks in the air, and he's not quite able to do it. So he's literally grabbed this like weirdly meta-theatrical moment where he's drawing attention to the play that he's in. And I think Shakespeare is also drawing attention to, hey, look, I made a modern version of this old-fashioned play. Here's the old-fashioned play I'm redoing. Look how much better I am than this old-fashioned garbage. So it's another one of these sort of big meta-theatrical moments, and that Hamlet stalls. It's interesting that Hamlet's main stalling tactic is let's put on a play. And sometimes you read the play and you're like, oh, well, maybe that makes sense. I guess the ghost could be lying to him. So if you do a play and show Claudius the play, then we can test his reaction and see whether the ghost told the truth. Like, come on. He did not suggest he didn't trust the ghost. The moment he got the idea to test the ghost's trustworthiness was the moment all the actors showed up, and he was so happy to see them all. And he says, I'm gonna write some lines for your play, and he's very excited about it. But it's this funny meta-theatrical moment in what is supposed to be kind of a serious play and a sort of serious moment. By the way, one of my other favorite no, it's not Harold Bloom, but it's somebody else. But it's Goddard, not the filmmaker, the Shakespeare critic, who had a great quote. He said that Hamlet, if you took Hamlet and Othello and swapped the lead guys, each play would be over in about 5 minutes. Right? Because if the ghost was like, Othello, your uncle murdered me, he'd be like, I'm gonna fuck that guy up, and then he'd fucking kill him. Right? And if Iago was like, let me speak pretty words to you, Hamlet would fuck with him. Hamlet would say a bunch of words back to Hamlet is the only person in literature that could out-talk Iago, right? Who could sort of spin all of Iago's little phrases. And because the one thing, by the way, that would defeat Iago was a decent sense of humor. That's a really crucial, because Iago is very deadly serious. If you were to make fun of Iago, he would fall to pieces. It's only because Othello is so credulous, is that how you pronounce that word, right? That sounds right. I read these things in books and then I don't. I've never learned how to say that era during which Oscar Wilde lived. The fin de siècle. Is that right? I always just do it like fake French and people will think I'm kidding, but I'm really just covering up the fact that I never learned how to say fin de siècle. Turn of the century in French, fin de siècle. I don't know. So Hamlet, he uses these meta-theatrical moments are the moments that he decides to like. That's what the play is filled up with and padded with jokes about theater and acting. And in fact, after Hamlet does the whole speech about after he does the speech he remembers the players doing, he gives his own speech. And in that speech, which is located on page 4, it's the famous, oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, sorry, I'm like halfway down page 4. Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit that from her working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in his aspect, a broken voice, his whole function, suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing, for Hecuba. What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peak like John of Dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing. No, not for a king, upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? But the point of the speech is that he compares himself. These actors can get themselves really, really worked up about the fictional characters that they're playing, looking ahead to method acting, which is really just toxic masculinity nonsense, method acting as a whole. That's what it is. The reason I'm going to do this real quick. Method acting, okay, there's two things. Method acting and infinite jest perform the same service for certain kinds of men, which is that acting and reading books is seen as like namby-pamby feminine nonsense that they got beat up for when they were in middle school. So they need to do something to make it hard and masculine and tough. So like I'm in my character, I could commit suicide, and it's in my head all the time. And then Infinite Jest is like, it's a really hard book to read. It's really long, because it would, right, if you had to read a sonnet or something, that'd be too easy or whatever. Like, just fuck off. So Jared Leto's entire disastrous performance in Suicide Squad was entirely because Heath Ledger killed himself playing the Joker, and then he was like, how are you gonna fucking outdo that? Heath Ledger died, like, and you're gonna play the Joker now, but it's hard to do. I mean, I'm going crazy because the character I'm playing is crazy. Like, calm down. You can't just have fun. It has to be torture and work, because that's what men do, and then they go into coal mines or whatever. I don't know. I majored in fucking poetry. I have no idea. It even happens, this meta-theatrical moment happens even at the moment of Hamlet's death. If you drop down to the very bottom of page 5, Hamlet says, I am dead, Horatio, wretched queen, adieu. It's a really mean thing to say to your mom. It's hilarious to me that he says that. I am dead, Horatio, wretched queen, adieu. You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audience to this act. Had I but time, as this fell sergeant death is strict in his arrest, oh, I could tell you. But let it be, Horatio, I am dead, thou livest. You that are but mutes or audience to this act. He's speaking to the people around him that are watching him die. But oh my God, doesn't it feel like he's talking? You're the audiences of this act. Right? You're the ones at home that are watching it. Same thing when he says, oh, this actor can work himself up into a whole fucking thing, and I can't even make myself care about my dead dad. But you're the ones watching an actor work himself up into a thing, right? It crosses the boundaries of that fourth wall. We all know where the phrase fourth wall comes from, right? There's a wall in theater, there's like a wall over here and a wall over here and a wall behind you, and then this would be the fourth wall. But thank God it's down, or you would just be watching a house, and that wouldn't be worth the ticket price. So, and the other thing, too, is that when Hamlet says, as long as memory lives in this distracted globe, I will remember thee, it's an interesting moment, too, because it's as long as there are seats in this theater, I will do this again and again and again and again, right? That Hamlet, this is night after, he's going to do 8 performances a week, right? He's going to do a performance every evening and twice on Sundays. As long as memory has a seat in this distracted globe, I will remember thee in the performance on Monday, and also the one on Tuesday, and also the 2 of them that I have to do on Sunday, right? There's a very similar moment in Waiting for Godot, which I saw with Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, and the actors themselves drew nice attention to a moment in Beckett's Waiting for Godot when he says, because if you know Waiting for Godot, they sit around and wait for some guy and he doesn't show up, and then Act 2 starts. And they do it again, right? But at one point, one of them says to each other, how long have we been doing this for? And he says, 40 years. And it's like, oh my God, I think you guys have been doing this together for 40 years, right? I mean, you guys have been friends forever. But it draws attention to the fact that the fact that Act 2 repeats Act 1 draws attention to the fact that this play repeats and repeats and repeats as people do it and do it again and do it again and do it again every night, 7 nights a week and twice on Sundays, right? So it's drawing attention not only to the theater that you're watching, but to the larger world where this play, Hamlet, will go on and on as long as memory holds a seat in this distracted globe. But also Waiting for Godot will go on and on and on. We will do this again, and we will do this again, and we will do this again. It draws attention to the repetition of the act of theater, which works slightly less well for movies, of course, because they record it once and you can watch the movie. But of course, Hamlet's been remade several times. Ethan Hawke did a version of Hamlet. It's not great. But it has Julia Stiles as Ophelia, and she's good, and it has Bill Murray as Polonius in one of the truly great pieces of stunt casting. And Kyle MacLachlan as Claudius, if you're a Twin Peaks person. Which is it's a fun, it's not, parts of it are good. I don't know. Ethan Hawke could wash his hair. So one of Hamlet's concerns in the play is how is he he wants to be remembered accurately, right? He wants Horatio to sort of, Horatio says he's going to tell, Horatio says, I'm going to kill myself. Since you're dying, I'm going to kill myself too, right? He says, never, on the top of page 6, Hamlet says, thou livest, report me and my cause aright to the unsatisfied. And Horatio says, never believe it. I am more an antique Roman than a Dane, meaning antique Rome, the ancient Romans killed themselves when their sort of masters died. And Hamlet says, thou art a man, give me the cup. Let go, by heaven, I'll have it. O good Horatio, what a wounded name, things standing thus unknown shall live behind me. If thou didst ever hold me in thy heart, absent thee from felicity a while, and in this harsh world draw thy breath and pain to tell my story. Right? Hamlet wants his story told, and indeed Hamlet's story is told night after night after night after night. And one of the last lines in the play, if you go to the top of page 7, one of the very last lines in the play, let 4 captains, the top of page 7, this is Fortinbras plays over, this is the very final words of Hamlet, of the play Hamlet, is that Fortinbras, which is the name of the dog from Wrinkle in Time, I just found out, because I'm reading that book. I never read it before. Let 4 captains bear Hamlet like a soldier to the stage. Huh. To see they're going to make a big public spectacle out of Hamlet, but indeed a big public spectacle is made out of Hamlet every night. And Hamlet himself does a larger sort of theatrical move. And the next 2 passages I want to look at are a little bit less, well, let's look at them. My favorite line in all of Hamlet is this discussion. Actually, you know what? I'm skipping down to the second one. Where Hamlet says, oh God, I could be bound in a nutshell and count myself king of infinite space. That's in the middle of page 7. I'm doing that one first. Hamlet says, oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams. Which dreams indeed are ambition, for the very substance of the ambitious is merely the shadow of a dream. A dream itself is but a shadow. Truly, and I hold it ambition of so airy and light a quality that it is but a shadow's shadow. Then are our beggars' bodies, and our monarchs and outstretched heroes the beggars' shadows. Shadow is a word for actor. You're going to hear it again in a second when we talk about Puck's speech that ends Midsummer Night's Dream. But it's a word for shadow. In fact, Macbeth, we already talked about it, but when Macbeth's speech, he says, life is a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and he elsewhere says shadow. But Hamlet's drawing attention to the fact that he's linked up, in mentioning shadows and dreams together, he's linked up dreams and theater, right? That they're the same kind of thing, because both dreams and theater are somewhat unreal. Right, you're watching something it's really happening in front of you, but it's portraying, it's not real. Nobody really dies, as Bottom tells everybody in Midsummer Night's Dream. Nobody actually gets killed when you see them stab themselves. Don't worry about it. But Hamlet is linking up both dreams and theater in this moment, and of course he's saying yeah, you know what? I'm moving on to the next one because I'm going to connect it. Right above that, Hamlet says, I don't really come here with a plan. I have a handout and then I see what happens. Rosencrantz, my favorite line in all of Hamlet is this part above where Hamlet says, my lord, you must tell us where the body is and go with us to the king. If you've seen me do Olios before, I often harp on this particular passage. They're looking for Polonius's body, right? Hamlet has killed Polonius. And they need to find Polonius's body. And Rosencrantz says, my lord, you must tell us where the body is and go with us to the king. And Hamlet says, the body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. Again, Hamlet loves to fuck with people. You can imagine him talking to Iago, right? It would make him crazy. The body is with the king, but the king is not with the body. The king is a thing, my lord, of nothing. It's an interesting moment because what Hamlet is doing in that passage is he's saying that the body is with the king and the king is not with the body. He's using complicated sort of political metaphor. The body is with the king, meaning Polonius's body is in the castle somewhere with the king. He's hidden it in the castle. So the body in that sense is with the king, right? But the king is not with the body, which means both the king doesn't specifically know where in the castle the body is, but also the king, King Claudius, is not, he doesn't have the best interests of the body politic. Right, he's referring to the idea that the people, it's an old-fashioned Renaissance metaphor that the king is the head and that the people are the body. You see this actually in India, the caste system, right? Yeah, you don't say caste, you say caste, yeah. So in India, the caste system is also works out like that. But we still have it today in corporate America, right? The head of the corporation. He's the head of the company. He writes a metaphor about how he's the head, and therefore you, all of the workers, are the body that he can sort of order around. But what Hamlet is, so Hamlet is making a joke about King Claudius. He's not really supported by King Claudius doesn't have the people's best interests, right? Claudius took over the kingdom not because he thought it would help the people, because he thought it would help themselves. So in that sense, the king is with the body, sorry, I screwed it up. The body is with the king, but the king is not with the body, right? Meaning the Polonius's body is with King Claudius, but he doesn't know where it is. But also, the body is with the king, meaning the people think Claudius is on their side, but in fact the king is not on their side. And then Hamlet says, the king is a thing, my lord, of nothing. And he's drawing attention to the fact that in like ancient Egypt or whatever, right, they would think that the king was like God's representative on earth, right? So if the king is God's representative, the problem is that you can't, there's no way to prove that you're the king, right? There's not like a kingometer I can put near you and go, oh, that's the king, right? It doesn't go tick, 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 tick. So you can't, so the question, you have to believe that God put the king in charge of the country, right? But if you don't believe, then we have a little bit of a problem because there's no way for the king to prove he's the king. He can prove he's the brother of the last king, but the larger question of whether or not he is the king, Hamlet's drawing attention, because of all of his noticing of theatrical stuff, about the way that life is structured a lot like the play also, right? How does a king get to be a king? Well, a king is a guy who stands on a stage in front of an audience of people and pretends to be another person. I am the king! In front of an audience of people who pretend to take him for that person. And you all go, you are the king, right? If I go, I'm the king, and you don't do that, I'm not the king anymore. Right? Imagine what would happen if everybody had the internet, and then the king went to sleep, and everybody in the middle of the night was like, okay, tomorrow morning when we get up, we're going to say he's not the king. And then he gets up and he's like, I am the king. And then everyone can go, no, you're not. No, that's crazy. You're crazy. He becomes that crazy guy on the subway that claims all kinds of things that aren't true, right? Because the only thing that makes him king is he doesn't have some kind of kingly essence that would prove that he's the king, right? What makes him king is the people's belief in him. If they believe he's king, just like Christian Bale is Batman, as long as you believe he is Batman. But if you don't believe that, then the whole movie falls apart. And I'm sure you've seen movies where the wrong person was cast in the movie, and you could never really get into the movie because you couldn't see the character. You just saw the actor, and you were like, that's not really the right person to play this role. I should be able to come up with an example off the top of my head, but I don't have anything. Does somebody have an example?
Did you put your name in the goblinary?
That's extra complicated. I'm not doing that. I love that, though. That's awesome. Right. Oh, I forgot about that. That's good. What? Tom Cruise always plays himself, doesn't he? Yeah, that's a good... The Harry Potter one's complicated. I love that. That's a really good example. What?
You didn't even read the book.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that. But what Hamlet is doing is he's using his knowledge of theater and sort of meta-theatrical moments that you've already seen in the play where he's talking about the nature of acting. He's now applying that knowledge, that meta-theatrical knowledge, and the fact that people pretend to be things that you have to pretend as well, to deconstruct the entire notion of kingship, right? The king is a person who says, I am the king, and you have to all say he's the king. And if you don't say that, poof, he's not the king anymore, he's a crazy guy on the subway. And you know this is a problem, because if one person in the room says, you're not the king, what do you do with that guy? You kill him. Do you send assassins to his house in the middle of the night and kill him? You kill him in front of everybody. You got to drag him Ned Stark style up on stage and chop his head off in front of everybody, because if that guy tells two people that the king isn't the king, and then you each tell two people, and then those two people tell two people, and blah, 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 pretty soon the king wakes up in the morning, he's not the king anymore. What Hamlet has figured out is that reality is a lot like theater. And uses those same kind of theatrical devices that we associate with being in a theater with being on, with life. And of course, this is the same thing that Macbeth does when he says that life is a poor player that struts. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury and signifying nothing. Macbeth is noticing, Macbeth is making a connection between life and theater. Hamlet also makes these connections between life and theater, and he also brings in dreams, that he starts to notice that how substantial are these categories, right? The last line of the last Hamlet quote on page 7, then are our beggars' bodies and our monarchs and outstretched heroes the beggars' shadows, right? That poor people cast their shadows. Shadows, a word for actors also. But it's like their belief in him, something unreal, makes him the king, right? And Hamlet has started to apply this outward. Shakespeare does interesting stuff with this, particularly in the epilogues to The Tempest and to Midsummer Night's Dream. And these are the last two quotes I kind of want to look at. The Tempest it's not my favorite play, actually. I feel like it's slightly overrated, but it has some great stuff in it. And one of the neat things about The Tempest is that the Prospero is like a wizard or whatever, right? Julie Taymor did a movie. It was okay. Who played Holly? Who played the Prospero in Julie Taymor? It was Helen Mirren, right? It was I wanted to be Tilda Swinton. That's why I almost said Tilda Swinton, because I feel like that's like a really good idea. It was Helen Mirren plays Prospero. But it's an interesting thing because a lot of people have noticed that Prospero seems a lot like Shakespeare. He's sort of like a magical stage manager who flies around the island setting up illusions for people. So, for example, there's a funny meta-theatrical moment at the very beginning of The Tempest where you see the ship tossing in the storm. The Tempest is a major special effects blockbuster at Shakespeare's time, right? This is a lot of work to make a realistic-looking rainstorm at the beginning of the play. And that's an interesting moment, right? Because you're looking at the boat and being like, this is a real ship in a real storm, even though you know you're in a play and it's not real. And then Prospero comes out and says, I was in control of all of that. No one was ever in danger. Once again, we've short-circuited things. Like, none of those actors were going to drown, and he's kind of drawn attention to that, right, by pointing out that all of this is it's theater, right? He was in control of all of it. But that happens later. The first time you see the storm, you're like, that's a real ship that's really in trouble. And then Prospero's like, no, it's not trouble. It's just an illusion. You didn't know that. He tricked you. And then Prospero also, he puts on pageants. His primary power seems to be illusion, although it's mentioned he can raise the dead, which in an interesting sort of throwaway moment. But his powers are primarily illusions. And he makes spectacles for Ferdinand and Miranda to see this. The fairy kingdom can sort of make these. They're actors for him. And he gives them their parts, and they play a role. But he's a stage managing the whole thing. And then at the end, he sort of breaks his staff and drowns his book. And a lot of people feel like that's Shakespeare giving, because that's sentimentally, it's the last play Shakespeare wrote. That's not really true, but that's what we say. So he breaks his staff and drowns his book and gives up magic and goes back to the real world. Away from the magical island, he goes back to the real world of Milan. And in the play, in the last act, Prospero takes off all of his fancy wizard robes and puts on, he says, dress me in my regular clothes, like the Duke, because he's a dispossessed Duke. So they dress him back like that. And then the play ends, and then this weird moment, which is at the bottom of page 7, Prospero walks out and says, the play's over, right? Play's done. And the Prospero comes out to the audience. He's speaking directly to you now and says, our revels now are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, I'm turning with all of you, the solemn temples, the great globe itself. Oh, wait a minute. Whoops, sorry, wrong one. Page 8. I fucked that up a little bit, I'm not going to lie. At the top of page 8, at the end of the speech I was reading, which I really should have just continued with and pretended like I didn't fuck up, he says, we are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. right? He says that it's all, that he's, and actually at the top of that, I should read that whole speech. Anyway, top of page 8. The solemn temples, the great globe itself, ye all which it inherit shall dissolve, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. And of course, now that I pointed out the name of Shakespeare's theater is the globe, you all immediately saw the reference. He's saying the earth dissolves because it's insubstantial, because all reality is insubstantial, but specifically the globe theater where you are all in. She draws attention to that immediately. And he's talking at that point to a character in the play. But for the epilogue, he's talking directly to you, the audience. And he says, now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have's mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true, I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. But release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, let your indulgence set me free. He's speaking directly to you, the audience, and asking for your indulgence to get him the fuck off this island. And it's an interesting kind of pun. He has a couple of them in here, that these sort of double meanings. Release me from my bands with the help of your good hands. And then later on he says, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults, as you from crimes would pardon be. He's asking, on the one hand, the audience to pray for him, right? To pray for his release, like you would pray for a criminal or something, right? To be freed. Put your hands together and pray. But of course, the other meaning of with the help of your good hands, release him, he's asking for your applause. And what is odd about this moment is that he's still Prospero. He's like, I need to get off this island and to Milan. That's in the play. But he's speaking to you, the audience, and saying, like, I need your help to get me out of here. Only your applause will end this illusion nonsense that you've all been sitting through, and then I can get to Milan. No. You mean so you can take your actor robes off and just be a regular actor out on stage? But no, it's the character asking you for your applause for the play that he's in so that he can go somewhere else within the world of the play. This is a very complex and ridiculous moment, and is mirrored almost exactly by Puck's speech on page 1. It's a similar kind of moment that Puck says, if we shadows have offended, and by the way, there's the shadows meaning actors, means both sort of the fairy people, but also actors. Puck says, to the audience, this is speaking to you, if we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme, no more yielding but a dream. Gentles, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest Puck, if we have unearned luck, now to scape the serpent's tongue, we will make amends ere long. Else the Puck a liar call. So good night unto you all. Give me your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends. Again, give me your hands, right? You touch my hand and say, but applaud. Give me your hands. Give me your applause. Once again, you have a character. By the way, and Puck is part of the fairies, who are the people who have been sort of stage managing all the mortals' lives and screwing with them, much like a director would. Same thing with Prospero, who screws with the mortals. Prospero screws with the mortal lives and shows them a bunch of illusions. Same thing for Puck and Oberon. They screw with the mortals' lives and they show them illusions. And then these powerful creatures are able to kind of somehow use their powers to sort of cross over and speak directly to the audience about the play that you've been watching, while they themselves are both still characters in the play. And I want to, and also Puck says, he mentions dreams, right? And of course, the Midsummer Night's Dream has the word dream in the title, and Puck mentions this is all a dream. If we shadows have offended, think but this and all amended, that you have but slumbered here while these visions did appear. I've left something in my bag I need. So to kind of end, I was really I got on this subject because of a Borges short story. It's the same short story that has that quote that an actor is a person who stands on a stage in front of a group of people and pretends to be someone else in front of a group of people who pretend to take him for that person. The other thing, Borges, this is a story about Shakespeare. It's like a 2-page story. I was going to read the whole thing, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. The other thing he says in here is he's talking about Shakespeare. And he says that Shakespeare, while his body in whorehouses and taverns around London lived its life as a body, the soul that lived inside it would be Caesar, who ignores the admonition of the Sibyl, and Juliet, who hates the lark, and Macbeth, who speaks on the moor with the witches, who are also the Fates, the 3 weird sisters. No one was as many men as that man whose repertoire, like that of the Egyptian Proteus, was all the appearances of being. He says the fundamental identity of living, dreaming, and performing inspired him to famous passages. The fundamental identity of living and dreaming and performing inspired him to famous passages. There was most of the ones that we saw right there. The identity, it's the same thing, the dreaming and performing and acting. No, dreaming, performing, and living are all 3 the same thing. And it's that short circuit on those 3 things that collapse into one thing is, I think, Shakespeare's one of his sort of major points, and he's not breaking that fourth wall as a kind of joke or like an inside baseball or like a waka 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 moment. A lot of sitcoms do that, right? My favorite sitcom joke is a similar moment to that. It's on Third Rock from the Sun. Is that a thing people know? But there's a great moment where John Lithgow has to go pick up William Shatner from the airport. And William Shatner gets off the plane, and he says, "How was your flight?" And William Shatner says, "Oh, it was good, but the craziest thing happened. I saw a monster on the wing of the plane." And then John Lithgow goes, "The same thing happened to me." Which is a joke because famously William Shatner was in the Twilight Zone where he saw a monster on the wing of the plane, and then when they remade that Twilight Zone episode into a movie in the late 1980s, John Lithgow played the William Shatner role. That's a kind of wacky, did you get that? That's funny. Do you watch a lot of TV? But what Shakespeare is doing something else, right? He's doing something, making a more serious philosophical point about the identity between these 3 things. And I'm planning this summer on doing a whole series on specific Shakespeare plays, going through them one by one. My plan is to sort of show a movie with a bunch of people and then do a lecture afterwards, so you get to see the play and talk about it, and then having a limited number of people in a kind of reading group who will do a couple of weeks looking at actual language. But the other thing I want to do is David Lynch. And if you know David Lynch, it's my belief that the thing that links up David Lynch and Shakespeare is the fundamental identity of living and dreaming and performing. Where he likes to draw attention. David Lynch similarly draws attention to these funny things by having, for example, the same actor appear in more than one role. I'll see you at the curtain call, Dale Cooper says. The whole curtain thing is drawing attention to the heavy theatricality of it. All right, and I got one more thing and then I'm done. Okay, one last little thing to leave you with is the ridiculousness, the kind of one crazy meta-theatrical thing to leave you with is, sword fighting used to be a thing and people would fucking kill each other with swords, right? Then, fencing, like the Olympic fencing sport, that is a thing where you've taken the real life and death sword fighting, right? And you've turned it into a game, into a play. Fencing is fundamentally just a theatrical version of actual live hand-to-hand combat, just like Othello killing his wife is a fake theatrical version of real men that kill their wives, right? What's funny about Hamlet is that Claudius and Laertes poison the swords. So the real fighting becomes fake fighting in fencing, which then becomes really deadly with the poison, and of course none of it's deadly at all because all these actors are going to go home at the end of the night, and it's your belief that causes that to be deadly, because as long as you believe in the illusion, it's there, and it's the work that you're doing that causes that to function. And David Lynch asked this question in Twin Peaks, that we all live inside of a dream, but who is the dreamer? And I think that you want to go, oh, it's David Lynch. And in a lot of his movies, people go, oh, I can explain this movie. The main character is schizophrenic and it's all a dream. That's an easy way to sort of other it, to make it's about one crazy person and their fucked up brain. But I think David Lynch's point, as Shakespeare's, is bigger than that. It's not about one guy and his screwed up brain. It's about the fundamental identity of living and performing and dreaming. And that in these moments, we draw attention to the fact that, lost my train of thought. I'm almost done. I'm like, I have one sentence left. I should just say the last sentence. What was I saying? I lost my train of thought. I'm not even kidding. I actually lost my train of thought. What was I saying? David Lynch draws attention to the fact that... Right. Oh, right. I got it back. Okay. So the question of who's the dreamer, it's not some guy in the story that has schizophrenia, right? Because that makes it about one dude. It's about all of us. And it's about the dreamer is some bizarre combination of the person telling the story, that's Shakespeare, and the actors who perform the story, and also you. The dreamer is some kind of corporate body, not unlike the Holy Ghost in Catholicism. Who is the dreamer and who's making these the illusions work because it's Shakespeare's dream or David Lynch's dream, but it's also the actors, but it's also the audience members. And I think that's his big point about this art has this very strange zone where it seems to break that fourth wall and connect directly to life and do these kind of spooky effects are because you're sort of crossing out of your bounded skull identity and experiencing something bigger and something communal in both the case of David Lynch and Shakespeare. And now I'm done. Thank you. Were you guys here for the Othello thing that I did? Yeah. That was better, right? I got so fucking nervous because they mentioned me in the New Yorker before I did this talk on Othello, and I over-prepared, and then just, it was a mess. That was so much better than that. Let's do questions. What, David, are we doing questions? David, what are we doing? Are we doing questions, or do you have to leave? Boom.
Okay. First of all, I want to come back and do nocturnal animals because I want to hear that whole thing. Have you seen Nocturnal Animals yet?
No.
Okay. You must. No, it's Tom Ford's movie from a year ago, but you must, and then you must do an Olio on it because, yes.
I've never seen this movie, and I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm agreeing to that right now. I promise I will.
You must.
Okay.
Okay, and secondly, have you been watching all the Parkland stuff, all the kids in...
Yeah.
So they've been doing this very interesting thing where they keep looking dead at the camera during their interviews.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to break that wall. And I'm fascinated. You know, one, they're all theater kids, but then they're...
I know, isn't it amazing that it's theater kids that are doing the work?
Right. And they're like breaking, it's like they're looking dead at the camera and like breaking that wall. And I feel like they're like deprogramming us or something. And
because of course it's theater kids that understand the fundamental entertainment complex that is the news cycle.
Exactly. So anyway, I want you to also do that another time, and I'm going to come to that.
Can I tell you the ridiculous thing that I did because of the Parkland shooting? Am I losing my mind? I got a doorstop because I was like, maybe I can kick it under the door if there's a school shooting and save my kids. I don't think that's gonna work, but it's in my backpack all the time now. What? Oh my God! Does anybody in this room want me to have a gun? Does anybody think that's a good idea? Oh my God! Oh. And you see that meme that was like, are all teachers communists who are corrupting our students, and also they all need guns? Like, which one is it? Other questions? All right, we're done. I'm not going to go anywhere really quick, so I'm around to chit-chat with or whatever. I'm here, and I want to say thank you guys for coming out. Number one, because you're all fucking nerds who came out in this unbelievably bad weather. I can't believe there's this many people in this room right now, given the terribleness of the weather. But also, it's New York City on a Friday night, and you have so many options, right? I mean, you could be at an orgy right now. They're not even that hard to find. You have Google, right? Like you could be doing literally anything, and you came here to do this, and we really appreciate it. And please stay in touch with David and Chris, and get the emails, and come to other things. And it really genuinely does mean the world to us that you're coming here, because you have so many things you could be doing with your spare time, and you're choosing to come and listen to my madness and the madness that David and Chris host every week in this spot, and also at other places all over the city. And thank you guys so much for coming.